Up to 300 people are killed every year in accidents where the driver has fallen asleep at the wheel. Before you feel too tired, pull off the road into a services or other safe area. Drink some strong coffee and take a quick nap while the caffeine kicks in.
If you're having a nap, you've left your lights on, sir.
All right, cheers.
Think. Don't drive tired.
No. Wow, that's quite powerful, really. 2012, that was, TV advertising campaign from the road safety group Think, and that's because we're talking about sleepy drivers who could have bloods tested for tiredness after crashes. This is something that's been produced by the Australian Government Office for Road Safety. It could have implications because it would be used in prosecutions for driving while overly tired. Well, let's get a legal opinion on this now. And I'm joined by Nick Freeman, the criminal defence lawyer at Freeman and Co. Solicitors. Nick, what are your thoughts on this then?
Well, driving whilst tired is incredibly dangerous. It's been equated with driving above the prescribed drink-drive limit for a long time. So we've known it's dangerous. We know that a significant number of accidents are caused through fatigue. And when that happens, they are prosecuted. So there is a prosecution. And if someone falls asleep at the wheel, they will be charged with offence commensurate with their manner of driving. And, of course, it's no defence to say, oh, I was tired and I've fallen asleep. So they would feel the full weight of the law. So I'm not sure, first of all, how much further it's actually going to take us, except it crystallises the problem in a charge, and it will make us more aware that we don't need to drive, or we shouldn't ever drive whilst tired. If we actually need to be told that, we should already know that.
So it's not a specific offence at the moment, driving while tired?
No, but it's very relevant because often, I think about 25% of accidents are caused by fatigue, and even more fatal accidents are caused by fatigue. So it is a really serious issue, and I'm surprised that the government haven't done something about it for so long. But in any event, they're now talking about it. My view is it's a very subjective thing, and I'm not sure that an objective approach will actually work, because some people, and I include myself in this, don't have a great deal of sleep. And I'd like to think that I'm pretty alert and sharp most of the time. And if, for example, I would never have more than 6.5 hours sleep. That would be my maximum. I know 8 hours is recommended. And it's not just the time, it's the quality of the sleep, how you measure that, whether you know how you've slept accurately, whether you've dreamt, whether you've been awake for a bit. It's an impossible scenario. So to criminalise the consequences of poor sleeping when you're not really aware of it, all you're aware of is, I feel tired. If you feel tired, you need to take coffees, stop regularly, make sure you're hydrated, and just use your common sense, and don't ever drive when you think, oh, I'm getting too tired, I need to stop. Before that happens, you stop or you don't go out. That's what should happen. And I think a much more suitable approach would be for the government to adopt the similar types of tests that they used to adopt for driving whilst unfit. So a physical and mental test, you're asked to perform various physical tasks, mental tasks. Because that relates to you and your performance, as opposed to a blood test and trying to fix a level which is one fit for all, which just isn't going to work for the reasons that I've stated. So yes, it's good to point the finger at this problem, to criminalise it in a specific charge, but it's a case of how you actually go about convicting people. And my view is it needs to be a physical test for each person, as opposed to just a blood test, which I just don't think is fair, and I don't think it will work.
No, I can't quite see how a blood test, I'm not a scientist, so I guess they've developed a way where a blood test can test how much sleep you've had. But even if they did, if it went to court, could you imagine this sort of test then being questioned by somebody like yourself saying, well, what does this actually prove?
Well, yes, to answer your question, it would absolutely be tested by somebody such as myself. I may have had 3 hours sleep. I mean, this morning I was actually up at 4 o'clock. I feel alert, awake, And someone might say to me, well, the blood test might demonstrate how little sleep I've had, but it may have been good quality sleep, and it may not affect my levels of alertness. I feel I'm on trial now, actually. So it's such a subjective thing. That Margaret Thatcher was renowned for having a very small amount of sleep, and she had a superb brain, and certain people operate at a very high level with very little sleep. So, and similarly, you get the converse, which is people who have if you like, a sedentary existence. They sleep in, they have 8-10 hours sleep, are often quite dopey and lethargic. And so I'm confident this is not going to work. It's not going to be fair. But the idea of criminalising driving whilst fatigued in a specific charge, I think, is a good charge. And I'm not in any way denigrating the government for trying to tackle this problem. It's a problem that should be tackled, should have been tackled a long time ago. Is it going to take the law very much further? I'm not sure, because, as I say, it's already a very significant factor. I think by raising public awareness to people's fatigue, we see it on gantries now, that helps. I think education helps. It needs to be stigmatised, and people need to just be more sensible. It is already a serious aggravating feature. If you have an accident and you fall asleep at the wheel, the fact that you've fallen asleep is an aggravating feature. But more needs to be done to highlight it, to dissuade people from doing it. And if having a specific charge does that, well, then I can't see any problem with it. The problem, as I say, is I'm not a scientist, but the problem is coming up with something that works for everybody. And in my view, that has to be a subjective test for each individual.
And you mentioned this subjective test, and I don't know whether they still do this now, but this idea, I don't know that you can walk up and down in a straight line or something.
Well, yes.
Do they still do that?
Not very, very seldom, because now they have kits at the roadside to measure drugs. They have obviously equipment in the police station. And they have specific charges for drug offences. There are now, limits under fairly recent legislation, very tiny limits for drugs, literally, just over a trace. And that obviously is through a physical test. When I say a physical test, a scientific test. So the need for getting someone to walk up and down, or stand on one leg with their eyes closed or something like that, it is not really.
Doesn't really happen very much.
It doesn't happen unless the police don't have the equipment, or there's nothing to prevent them doing it. But it's OTOs. It's not necessary.
And what about professional drivers? Because I would have thought there may well be quite a lot of professional drivers listening at this time of the morning. Actually, they are sort of under pressure because they've got targets to meet, but there are limits, aren't there, to how long you can drive?
Well, there are for HGV drivers. There are, of course, very strict limits, and they have tachographs, and their records can be inspected, and there are serious penalties. If there's an accident involving an HGV and he's not complied with the regulations, then he has a serious problem because of that. And it is quite bizarre, I think, that car drivers can set off. I mean, and I'm guilty of this in the sense that I drive everywhere. I get travel sickness, so I don't use any other form of transport, quite literally. So I can drive over 1,000 miles in a day, but I'm acutely aware of what I need to do to keep myself alert. And if I don't feel up to it, or I'll break the journey up. So it depends how you feel. But it's slightly perverse, I think, that I'm allowed to do that, whereas an HGV driver is not allowed to do that. Why there isn't parity? Why it's all right for an HGV driver must stop every so often and rest, and a car driver such as myself doesn't need to.
We should have a tachograph on your car, Nick.
As long as it was going to be put on other people's cars as well, then listen, no one should ever drive when they're tired, because it's extremely dangerous, as the statistics support. And many of the time I've set off on a journey and thought, I need to have a rest, and I pulled into a service area and actually snatched some sleep, and then you feel refreshed. Or the other thing is this: people have coffees. Some people stop and have a coffee every hour and a half. So that keeps them alert. Or they have drinks like, I'm not going to mention the names of drink, but caffeine type of drinks to keep them alert, and that does the trick. So that's why it needs to be a subjective test and not a blood test.
Nick, thank you. That's Nick Freeman, criminal defence lawyer at Freeman and Co. Solicitors. Your views on